Thank you very much for coming along to the Accountability Board meeting on Tuesday the 12th of March. We're just going to quickly go around the table and introduce ourselves. I'm Caroline Henry, I'm the Police and Crime Commissioner of Nottinghamshire.
Michelle Butcher, Chief Executive and Monitoring Officer of the OPCC.
Julian Holder, Chief Finance Officer for the OPCC.
Dan Howard, I'm Head of Strategy and Performance for the OPCC.
Heather Mailer, Superintendent for the Prevention Hub and Strategic Lead for VOG.
Kate Mennell, Chief Constable.
Mark Dixon, I'm a Detective Chief Inspector with the Prevention Hub and I'm the Force Tactical Lead for VOG.
Thank you. Hopefully you've had a chance to look at the minutes and actions from the last meeting. I think all the actions that I've got are either closed or ongoing. I don't think there's any updates there.
No.
Thank you. So we're going to open straight away, Mark, with the public item today, which is some feedback from you on what you're doing about preventing violence against women and girls. Thank you.
No problem. So, thank you, ladies and gents, for inviting myself and Heather today. Obviously, as you can imagine, this is a core piece of work within policing and national priority as well as a priority, certainly within Nottinghamshire. I'm going to talk you through a little bit around why we're doing this, just so we get a little bit of an understanding, certainly for the public who may view this, and then I'll go into some specifics. And then as I'm going through, I'll ask you if you've got any questions, and then I'll quite happily talk you through any areas you want me to elaborate on or to clarify. So, tackling violence against women and girls, as I say, it is a national issue, it is a core policing issue, and ultimately is a big societal issue. Can we have the next slide, please?
There's a little bit of a lag, I'm afraid.
It's okay. It's not a problem. So, in terms of what it's coming across, well, I'll talk through what violence against women and girls sort of represents. So, clearly, violence against women and girls is very specific to gender, as we can imagine, and later on when I start talking about some of the facts and figures around that, it'll become a little bit more obvious. One of the questions we do often get is, why aren't we doing violence against men? And ultimately, men are a victim of various levels of violence and various levels of abuse, but significantly less in comparison in certain crime areas than women are. So we seem to have jumped on a few slides there, probably about 2 slides ahead. Sorry, that's where we should be. So taking you through it then, obviously, violence against women and girls came around almost 3 years ago to the date, so March 2021. We had the tragic murder of Sarah Everard, abducted from a street in London and raped and murdered. That brought around a spotlight on violence against women and girls. We saw all the protests in London, we saw all the work what went in around that, and quite rightly so. A thing a lot of people don't realise is that alongside Sarah Everard, who was tragically murdered on that day, 12 other women were also murdered in that month of March as well.
Yeah.
And they're often not forgotten about, because I'm sure families, friends and people respect that. But on that broader picture, actually, it gives us a real understanding of what that challenge is. To give you some more local sort of depth around that, last year in Nottinghamshire, there was 16,773 domestic crimes reported. Now, of them, around about 95-96% were female victims. So again, going back to why is this not violence against men or violence against all people, that's a shocking statistic to have. The financial year to date, we've had 1,019 rapes in Notts, and again, generally speaking, around 96-97% of that are female victims. So again, you start looking at that and you're thinking there's some significant areas of concern here, and that's why that focus rightly is against that violence against women and girls. So in response to the Sarah Everard murder and the increased awareness around violence against women and girls, a national action plan was put together by the College of Policing. A very large piece of work was undertaken, big review, as certainly those of us in policing are aware, and we came out with 3 pillars from the national overview of it. First was to improve trust and confidence in policing, both from our internal conduct but also how we deal with this offending crime type and our interactions with the public. Relentlessly pursuing offenders, that is a core policing role, let's be honest, so we need to be doing that, but also creating those safer spaces for women and girls in our society as a whole, because nobody should be having to think about that. And obviously when we're talking about safer spaces, we're looking at more than just geographical spaces. We're also looking at the house, we're also looking at places of work, places of recreation, but also cyberspace as well, which often gets missed out. So what are we doing about that then, from a Nottinghamshire Police point of view? So to improve trust and confidence in policing, I've broken it down to two parts really for you. Firstly, we're looking at that internal culture. So internally, as we know, the Chief Constable's come in and delivered the policing pledge. That policing pledge underpins everything we should be doing in policing, and it sets out the exact standards which are required from the Chief Constable, through myself, through Heather as senior leaders, right the way through the force, down to absolutely everybody within our organisation. And it's open to the public and partners, so everyone knows what they should expect from us. Behind that as well, there's a lot of work on changing our internal culture. So we've done a range of work around actually raising awareness of misogyny, hate crime, perceptions, microaggressions, all those little bits what build into that cultural change and that understanding of behaviour. So last year, through an external training provider, we delivered training to 1,200 members of staff, and we call it the Standby Hair Training. That was about them changing that perception and understanding of how violence against women and girls can impact females, regardless of where they are, but also some of that hidden misogynistic comments, or the downplaying of certain things, or the upplaying of other areas. So we did that area of work. We've committed again this year to carry on that training further. Again, using Communities Inc. as our training supplier, who can give us that proper voice of the victim, that understanding, which we can deliver as much training as we want in force, but do we really understand it from the victim's point of view or from a community's point of view? Well, actually, going to an external source gives us that. So the force, again, through the money freed up from the chief and from other areas, we've got funding for a series of courses for another year. That's going to hit around about 1,400 of our staff. That means we'll cover 2,600 of a 3,800 workforce, give or take. Obviously, we've got to manage that alongside our service delivery. And the reason we did that is because the College of Police, and we're in the process of putting together a package, but obviously we wanted something out quicker so we could really tackle that. The College of Policing have released their package now. We are reviewing it, and we'll see what that looks like going forward into 25-26. That may bridge that gap, or it may be that the chief and the other areas decide actually, yeah, we'll continue with that external partner. Other bits of work we've done around this then, and I think I can speak on behalf of the chief for this. The chief has shown a very zero tolerance approach to any misconduct in that Borg arena, and we've seen that, and quite rightly we've publicised some of them findings. As a male police officer, there's no acceptance for me for any of that. They should be rooted out and quite rightly kicked into touch. And we've seen that through the Chief Constable's disciplinary boards. So we've been very proactive on the front of that. One of the other areas we looked at was around vetting. So we're all aware there was some issues around Wayne Cousins and his vetting, and should he have not been vetted and the like. Back in 2022, we had a HMIC FS review around our vetting, and we was found to be good in that, and we had some good robust systems in place, and we've built on them still even further. So that's the internal part of it, and then changing that internal culture. But also we're going to look outside and look at that external community engagement. So it's all right us understanding what's going on in-house. What do the public need? What do the public want? It's easy to go quite simply off facts and figures and numbers, but that's not always what's there. We know there could be hidden demand, hidden risk, and communities that might not engage us usually. So some of the work we've done around that, we've developed a public observation scheme. So I started looking at developing that back in November. It went live December, soft launch, but obviously we want to make sure we've got it right. And we've now rolled that out across into the communities. So again, I know from your office, giving sure that you also publicised some of that for us, and some of them partners came in around that. And part of that public observation scheme, there's three elements of it. Partly is going to the control room, understanding how we grade jobs as they're coming in, understanding how we apply what we call threat, risk and harm. So who's most at risk and where we're going to put our resources. We also do two probably key areas I find around engaging that public trust and confidence. Firstly, being what we call the ride-along scheme. where members of the public get to go in a car with a response officer and actually see how our day progresses and what we go to. Given them facts that I gave you earlier, 16,773 domestic incidents, there's usually a good chance you're going to end up at a domestic related incident. So members of the public get to see frontline what our officers deal with at them incidents and how they deal with that incident and look to safeguard those victims. That's one good area of it. The other area is actually what goes on in the community on the ground. And we all know, and I think it's fair to say, not everything gets reported to us, not all those concerns will come in, and there'll be some bits of, and I speak from my own example here, I had my car broken into a few years ago and I thought, I'm not going to bother reporting that. It was before I came into policing. I spoke to a mate of mine who's a police officer and said, no, that's really important, you've got to report it. Reported it, and then that linked into some other crimes and it was solved. We needed to tap into what does that look like on the ground. So one of them areas is what we call walk and talk. So that is an opportunity for members of the community to go out and do what we'll call, from a policing term, a beat walk. Walking around your local area with a local PC. Gives that member of the community an option then to say, you know what, officer, I don't like walking down that street because when I do, there's often a group of lads at the end who being abusive or being leering or what. We can then work with the MPIs to say, let's target that area. There's other areas as well where it might be, actually it's really dark down there and we don't like it because it's really dark or there's no CCTV. Well, that's not for us from a policing point of view, but we can work with our partners there. We can go into local councils, we can use Safer Street money, and we can look to enhance in that area. We can also work with our design out crime team to see if we can make that area a bit stable. Today, around the public observation scheme, we've had 23 deployments, for want of a better word, between both the walk and talk and the ride-along scheme, and we've got another 161 planned in at the moment. So we're working through, obviously, every deployment we have a risk assessment, we have to look for capacity to take them out, and how we can do that safely. So we have got a bit of a backlog at the moment. One of the other areas we did, that I launched, and again it developed in November into December and realistically launched properly in January, was what we call the GWEN, Girls and Women Engagement Network. And that's about getting into these community groups and just being a voice there, or being a set of ears there more importantly, to hear concerns from that local community group. So again, relatively soft launch to start with because we want to make sure we hit the right areas. Currently we've got 11 groups signed up to it regularly. And they come from a range of demographics in our community. So we've got the Nottinghamshire Muslim Women's group. They're heavily involved, so we go down there once a month. We sit in one of their community meetings. The first time we went there, we gave a little bit of a talk on what we're doing, but now it's about just being there. Can women who attend that meeting now access a police officer or PCS on a regular basis who they know, trust and develop? Absolutely, and we've been going there for 3 months now. And on the back of that we can start understanding them local issues. We've done likewise with the LGBTQ plus community as well. So in Nottinghamshire they've got a small female group who meet regularly, and again we've got an officer who goes to there. Because again, even though they're in a different social setting, for want of a better word, they can still be victims of violence against women and girls. Absolutely. And it's right that we're getting into that group, and we're now building that trust and confidence again with a group who in the past might not have reported the fact that they're getting heckled, abused or whatever going down the line. More recently we've worked with Amara, and that for me was a really important one because that gives us that opportunity to hear the voice of the victim. So I went to the first meeting myself. I booked in for an hour. I spent 3 hours there, and I listened to the absolutely harrowing accounts from some of these women.
Sorry, just to interrupt, but when I think of Amara, I think of under 18s. I don't know if it was because we've done some work with Amara where they support children who girls who've been victims. And
it was a bit of both. So there were young females there, and there was also older females who were also getting the sexual violence support from that group as well. So I was hearing, some good things and some bad things from those groups, and that helps us shape our response going forward. So one of
that lived experience is so important.
Absolutely, it's absolutely huge. And as I say, it was in the diary for an hour. I ended up spending 3 hours with them because that's the amount of time that they afforded. They needed that time.
Yeah.
We're there again this week, and we're carrying on that. So we're really committed to that. Other areas we've looked at, we've done Nottinghamshire. I'm going to get in a lot of trouble now from Notts Forest for this. Nottingham Forest, not Notts, is it? Nottingham Forest ladies. We've done their females teams, so we've gone in and had conversations with them. Because again, sometimes while they're playing football, they're hearing horrific abuse from the stands. Why? We don't get that. And again, it was giving them that input. Actually, we take this seriously. We've got a dedicated football unit who will do some work around this with you. These are your links in. And also, they come from a range of societal groups within Nottinghamshire as well. So again, we could feed back into those groups. So as I said, we've got 11 Gwen groups on at the moment. We're going to be reviewing that probably next month, getting a bit of feedback around how it's going for them. I've already had some feedback both from public observation and the Gwen schemes. All of it's very positive, but we need to put a proper review into that probably around the 3-6 month time. And then we'll be reinvigorating Gwen again to go again, see if we can get into some more of those groups now we know it's working.
So thinking of some of our harder to reach communities,
Absolutely.
if somebody's watching this and they'd like to invite Nottinghamshire Police, how best to do that?
And I'm sure some technical genius in here will be able to put my email address up. Basically, just email me. So email Mark Dixon, Nottinghamshire Police, and I'll pick up the email. Just make a reference to the Gwen meetings. I'll get in touch and we can talk through it. And then after that, we can set that in process. Any questions around what we're doing around internal and external to build trust and confidence?
Just a few reflections as you've been talking. You talked about violence against women and girls being a national issue. I actually think it's an international issue.
Absolutely,
it's not just in the UK. But we have a very joint approach in Nottinghamshire, which I'm very proud of. Shocking numbers, 16,773 domestic incidents, and we know that's the tip of the iceberg because you've already alluded to the fact it's not everybody reports, and I want to really encourage anybody to report. I don't think anybody knows somebody who hasn't been affected by domestic. And I want people to have the confidence to report it to Nottinghamshire Police and to know that the culture in Nottinghamshire Police will mean that they get listened to and they get believed and they get supported.
Absolutely, and that's a fantastic point you raised there, Commissioner, that people may be hesitant to pick the phone up and make that phone call because of either what they've heard in the past or perceptions of anybody ringing up Nottinghamshire Police reporting being a victim of domestic abuse, violence against women and girls. We will treat you as a victim. You are not the offender in this. We will treat you as a victim, and we need to know about that so we can not only help you and do all the policey bit around let's arrest the offender and all that type of stuff, because sometimes that might not be the option what you want, that might not be the outcome what will work for your society, but we can then link you into the right partners, the right people to give that long-term safeguarding. So yeah, absolutely.
I've actually been on the standby here training. It was done here at Forces headquarters. I thought it was excellent actually from Community Sync. And actually, one of the things which really resonated with me was about victim blaming language and how careful the Nottinghamshire Police are with the language around that. You mentioned about the new College of Policing potentially bringing in a package. I'd be interested to see how that compares with what we've got here. You talked about zero tolerance approach to serving police officers and staff with regards to any misogyny, and we'll call it out. You've really driven that forward, Chief, since you've been here and made some good decisions on that. You mentioned HMI. We've got a good for vetting. It's quite hard to get a good from HMI. Yeah. So and vetting is so important. And I'm going to dig into some questions around that later. Any more reflections?
I suppose I think it's sort of the broader point rather than sort of internal or community engagement, Mark. It's whether you feel the Commissioner might have a role in helping the force's efforts internally and externally in terms of that partnership landscape, because everybody's got their own plans, haven't they, as agencies to tackle this issue. I know there's a Nottinghamshire plan as well, but it may be a question for the Chief, but is there a role for the Commissioner here to help the force's efforts in terms of the partnership convening, really?
Can we set a man?
You can go and then I'll add a bit on the end.
Yeah, of course, ma'am. Absolutely, there is that joint approach. So we have a 4P plan, and I'll talk on that in a little bit more sense to explain to members of the public what that is. But we have our tactical 4P plan, our strategic plan, which delivers those MPCC aims and objectives. We're in the process of reviewing that at the moment because we've had some latest guidance come out. That'll be going live from the 1st of April. That plan fits into the PCC strategic plan, and there's a natural overlap between them. And we come to various meetings with the PCCs, and we feed into both of them boards. So representatives in PCC's office sit in our strategic and tactical. Likewise, we feed into the PCC's strategic plan as well. So there's definitely an overlap there. I know we've worked very closely around delivering various projects in a whole area of Vogue. So yeah, in answer to your question, yes, we're already doing that, but going forward, absolutely, there's definitely that close link between the two, which we need to carry on, both delivering what we're delivering, but also looking for further opportunities.
I think it's about the extra reach that OPCC and the PCC can offer out to the community in addition to what we can do as well. And Mark's obviously articulated a lot of that, but I think we're always exploring those opportunities.
And where the Commissioner has got funding streams available through government, like Safer Streets you mentioned, the Commissioner's funding opportunities, it's making sure we know where the gaps are, I think, in service provision across the whole partnership, as to where the Commissioner's funding can have the most benefit to complement what the force and partners are doing, I think. So working together on where that is would be helpful, I think.
Absolutely, and again from an operational point of view, I know when we was at Ashfield, we did a lot of work at Ashfield. Like we had the first safety refuge camera up at Ashfield, and I think again going back to what the Chief said around that reaching to the right areas at the right places. What I needed in Ashfield is probably different than what they'll maybe need in the town centre or in Rushcliffe or somewhere else.
Yeah.
So absolutely that changing resource for that relevant demographic and relevant environment, absolutely, and again the office can give us that external reach into those areas.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Moving on then to relentlessly pursuing offenders. So as I said, this is a core policing duty for me. I joined the job to lock up bad men and bad women. Quite simple. And I think all of us as police officers, set out to do that. We want to lock up the bad guys and bad girls and drive that forward. But specifically around violence against women and girls, then, as I say, this came back in 2021, following the death of Sarah Everard. I joined Nottinghamshire Police August 2014, and I always remember sitting down with my first sergeant, Helen Fuller-Whelan, and she said, "There's two things you will always go to first. You'll go to any domestic abuse and any rape or serious sexual offence. Don't care what else you're dealing with, you will go to them." And that was back in 2014. Nottinghamshire Police approach hasn't changed from that. That is where the threat risk and harm lies, and we recognise that before Vogue came in. Obviously, this Vogue umbrella has given us more focus, more scrutiny, and more accountability in that area, and we've started to do more work in that around really driving some of that proactive policing. So at the moment, our arrest rate for domestic abuse is around about 45%. So again, domestic abuse can be from anything from that very loud verbal argument up to and including GBH, attempt murder. So we've got to be quite balanced within that approach. It'd be very easy to say we arrest everybody and be at 100%, but Code G pace and the necessity test will play a part of that. So we need to have that balance between what we'd like and what the utopian would be against actually what does the law and legislation tell us. So 45% for me is about right when you start looking at the crime types and the variance within that. Some months it will be a little bit higher, some months it might be a little bit lower, but a year-on-year average is around about 45% for me, which is probably thereabouts. Relentlessly pursuing offenders though goes beyond just that, putting a set of handcuffs on someone and getting into a custody block. We also have to look at what we can do preventative around that as well. So we have a very good team which we brought under our command in November. So we built a dedicated safeguarding disruption intervention unit, which brought inside to us civil orders teams. So prior to that, they were set across different teams. We've now brought them into one team, so we get that balanced approach across that. In terms of civil orders then, so we've currently got 64 stalking prevention orders live in force at the moment. So that's quite high, higher than most other forces. We've built into our new operating procedures a way of managing and governance them, and I'll touch on that in a little bit more details. We also have 10 live DPVNs, so domestic violence protection orders. So they come in 2 stages. The order part is what we can put on from the police, gives us basically 28 days respite for the victim, and then we can go to the courts, get that made into a notice. And then, DPVN is ours, the notice is ours, and then the order is from the court, which then gives us an extra 3 months of work on it. So we've currently got 10 live. Now they'll fluctuate depending on what's going on in society, as you can imagine. We usually average between 10 and 20 a month. So December and January, as you can imagine, Christmas, high emotional states, excess drink, excess family time, all those variables which compound domestic abuse, we went up to 26. February, short month, went down to 8. So we will see the natural ebbs and flows, but generally speaking, it'll be between 10 and 20 DVP and DVPOs a month. Now, as I say, we've now built a system in place where we can start monitoring those civil orders and how we go about that. One of the things we launched in January was Op Saltash. So Op Saltash is the proactive management of civil orders. So when we have a civil order, we're in the process of developing an IT system to help simplify this. But within the first 28 days of us obtaining an order, we now go out and revisit both the victim and the offender. We revisit the victim to say, are you happy with the order? Are you happy, you understand what the order means and the fact that there is an order? And while I'm here, has the offender breached that order by any chance? Have they contacted you? What have they been doing? Builds that trust and confidence, partly, but also allows us to identify potential breaches. We'll then also go out and speak to the offender. So quite a lot of the orders may have not to contact by the phone, let the police access your phone and review data and all that type of stuff. And then we can go out and we do that proactive way. Now, the reason we do have that 28 days is that's that key period, isn't it? That's that key time. So under the domestic violence umbrella, we've got 28 days to do that anyway. Under stalking, it's that key time of that breakdown of relationship, isn't it? And when you start looking at the Monckton Smith model of domestic homicide, that trigger point could be a change of circumstance. And we've generated that change, haven't we? So we go out and proactively police them. Since we've started running this in mid-January, we started doing the visits, we've made 4 arrests for breach of civil orders already. And we've got more days of action built into the future. So a really good piece of work that we're doing, really proactive. It's done on overtime through some additional funding we have available to us. We're using cops from other areas who want to come in and actually work on their days off to do this, and the feedback from the cops is this is brilliant because we're actually protecting victims going out and that's the feedback we're getting from the lads and lasses on the front line who are going out and doing these orders, so they're really driven around that.
I think it's important to say as well, Mark, that those breaches wouldn't have been reported to the victim if the officer's not made the proactive approach. So that kind of really is preventing further offences, isn't it, and escalation?
Absolutely. On one of them, even though we'd been round and spoke to the victim, she said, no, everything's fine, it's fine. We then still went to the offender anyway, looked at his mobile phone, and there was communications on there, so we arrested him, brought him into custody and went back and said, we've seen this. And he went, actually, yeah, now you've got him, thank you, and then gave us a statement on the back of that. And he ended up getting, I think, got 6 weeks in prison for the breach. So yeah, absolutely, it's a new proactive measure that we've brought in. So whilst that sounds all great, and that's the proactive work that we're going out and doing that doesn't take away from what we're doing on a daily basis. And this is stuff we've had in for a long time. So every morning we have what we call the DDM document, Daily Demand Management Document. On there, if someone's identified as high risk for domestic abuse and they're an outstanding offender, it gets raised at that meeting and we will go out and hunt down that perpetrator. And that happens every day, regardless. And that's been going on for forever and a day, as long as I can remember being in force. That's been on that document.
I've been to the briefings where they've been dishing those jobs out.
Yeah. And again, you never get any pushback on them jobs.
No.
And our partners in OS, operational support, who you'd think are driving around in fast cars with blue lights and ARVs, our firearms officers,
Yeah.
They'll still go out and they'll go and hunt these people down for us.
Yeah.
And I don't use the term lightly. Hunting sounds quite aggressive, but we are, because we should be. We should be out hunting these high risk offenders down, and that's what we're doing on a daily basis. And generally speaking, when you're on that DDM list, you're going to get arrested pretty quickly, because the force focus is on that, and we really drive some of them in.
Commissioner, can I just follow up on that one, if you don't mind, Mark? Just so obviously that proactivity around the enforcement of breaches is really important, because the number of orders is just half the story, isn't it?
Absolutely.
But how sustainable is that approach in terms of those proactive visits? Because it's resource dependent, presumably, Mark. Is it a sustainable approach?
It is. It is resource dependent, and yes, at the moment we are tapping into some overtime money, which is there. What that looks like in the future, again, we're casting stones there, aren't we? We don't know what's going to come down the line from central government. We don't know that when we do a review of this in, say, 6 months' time, that we say to the chief, could we have a unit? And we go, yeah, we've got some resources we could put into that. I can't say that at the moment, and I'm certainly not going to put the chief in a position to answer that. But I think while we've got that pot of money available, we're always going to dip into it. If that didn't become available, we'd still do the research, we'd still do the information gather, and then we'd share that with our partners. So just because we're doing the patrols as well, we still work closely with neighbourhood policing, for example. We still share all the information around the orders. We check every day for the breach. If we get a breach on what we're not actively policing that week, let's say we've done the patrol on the Monday and this comes in on a Wednesday, then we will build a job on the incident log, and someone will go out and arrest that person for us from the response. So whilst at the moment we can facilitate using that, we have other safeguards in place as well.
I think as well, this is sort of, in terms of the direction I wanted to take the force around prevention and more focus on prevention, this is indicative of the work we need to do. So not only, or most importantly, we're protecting vulnerable people who are at risk from some of these high risk offenders, but also what we're trying to do is get upstream of our demand. So, whilst at the minute we're sort of dealing with a lot of demand that comes in, with the work that Heather's leading on, if we can get this prevention bit right, we're obviously safeguarding people, but we're also then reducing our demand, which then means we've got additional resources to be able to do the safeguarding. Yeah. So that's the direction that I'm wanting to take the force.
Yeah, because that enforcement bit is extremely important around deterrence, isn't it? And not all forces are doing that. They're getting the civil orders, but Nottinghamshire obviously doing more than that in terms of proactivity.
Yeah. I'll just add a brief bit on the kind of strategic direction of this. So what Mark's running at the minute is kind of a pilot of working out some IT systems that are going to reduce some demand to support the work that Mark's currently delivering. And then once the neighbourhood model is brought in and embedded, we know that the aim is for neighbourhood officers to have more capacity to deliver this preventative work, and they will be part of these checks as part of their duty time duties, and working with the neighbourhood super to make sure that that is planned in as part of one of their duties moving forward. So there's a role for the STIU to continue with that work, supported by neighbourhood officers who, if that's an extra layer then, that we've got IB officers who are in tune with the victims and suspects that are in their areas. That's the kind of next stage, no pressure, Mark, to make the pilot work.
Yeah, thanks. But again, as Heather's quite rightly pointed out there, this is an evolving piece of work. Yeah. So we're doing some work with our colleagues in OS about a piece of kit, piece of software they're bringing in, which could potentially highlight people who are on orders as well. So if an officer goes into an area and they know there's a high risk stalker, for example, they could then go and check their conditions as well. So there's a whole myriad of work feeding into what is just a concept which has been running for 3 months at the moment. Just a couple of last bits around this, really, because it's all right talking around that. That very policey driven proactive elements, but we also need to remember at the back end of that as well, it's alright putting cuffs on people, but we need to get through the courts. It's alright as locking them for 24 hours, we want them away for quite a while, because that gives the real safeguarding to the victims. So we have a range of groups ran through the public protection team, which again they'd be able to give you far more detail than I, but we have things like the DA standards meeting where we look at the standard of our investigations and we start working towards actually how can we work better together with CPS, with probation service, with partners, to get that holistic all-round support to, yes, lock up offender and get a decent tariff on that offender, but also what support can we put in place for the victim on the back end of that, be it special measures, be it civil orders, longer term civil orders such as non-molestation orders and the like. And we also do the same thing with rape and serious sexual assault, so we have regular RASO meetings, what we call GIAMs, which is again a joint operational meeting with CPS, with RASO lawyers, so rape and serious sexual offence lawyers, with IDVA and ISVA services, so them advocates for the victims. So it's not just about locking people up and getting them in the cells and putting them before the courts. It's actually about keeping them in the courts and keeping them into the cells, and actually when they're coming back out, what are we doing to safeguard that victim in the longer term. Any questions around relentlessly pursue?
Is it worth just mentioning the DVIM?
Yeah, I'll touch on the DVIM. Good point. So one of the areas I have is IOM, so Integrated Offender Management. Within that we have what we call the DVIM, Domestic Violence Integrated Offender Management Court. Within that we have 40 offenders who are directly managed by offender management, so they are police officers who work closely with probation service, people like Clean Slate and other areas, to provide holistic management of those offenders for domestic abuse. Generally speaking, they'll be medium risk offenders, so they'll be categorised as medium risk offenders. Generally they will have had a significant prison sentence, usually on the back of it to hit the right scoring matrix, and quite often on the back of there they will have multiple victims as well, is what we often find. So the DVIOM team manage that individual and put a load of safeguarding around that, so we arrange joint visits with CGL, Clean Slate, probation officers. We work closely with local police in around any change in intelligence, so has he got a new partner is usually quite a big indicator sometimes. We work with that person to address their offending behaviour, so be that different courses they need to go on, different measures, so things like the RB devices, the remote breathalyzing devices, things like that, what we might need to use. And that's a cohort of 40 which we run and actively manage. That cohort keeps turning over, so every month we'll review it and we'll score the necessity to keep them on and change them through. Probably the most important part alongside that though is we have IDVAs working alongside that team. So it's not just let's put the wraparound around that offender, we actually go back into their victim or victims in most cases, and we do a lot more supportive work with them as well. So we work really closely with probation service and the IDVA services to give that joint manage the offender, but also let's safeguard that victim in the longer term as well.
It's getting that balance right, isn't it?
It is.
Perpetrator focus and victim focus.
It's very easy from a policing point of view to be very, let's lock up offender, and yeah, brilliant. You know, like I say, when we're kids and we're running around the estates going Nino, we're not saying I'm going to review a disclosure schedule over a phone, although myself and the chief are detectives, so we'd like that type of stuff. That's where you get drawn into policing, that side of it, but actually, you know what, that's just the surface of policing. That protecting and safeguarding of the vulnerable victims and any victim within Nottinghamshire Police, within our areas and beyond, that actually is probably about 80% of our business. And you've looked back to the Chief's pledge, it's there, it's written down. If you look at the code of ethics, it's there.
Shift changing some of this as well as about understanding what the victim wants. Having the victim locked up is not always what they want, and it's understanding the other options, civil orders that are in place to safeguard the victim and get that bit right from the start.
Yeah.
I was at the launch of the remote breathalyzer. With the first place, Nottinghamshire Police, the first place in Europe to use it. It's sometimes a step down when people have had the alcohol tag done.
Yeah.
And some people ask for them, don't they?
Yeah, absolutely. So what used to happen is you'd have your alcohol tag on, which absorbs your sweat, basically, and says how much alcohol you've got in your sweat for your skin. And they'd hit a point where they've been on it X amount of time, and the reports would come back that you're not drinking, basically. And then the order would run out, so we'd take that tag off them because it's no longer fit for purpose or use. But then quite often you'd find the offender that they actually liked having it on because it held them to account. And now they've got nothing and they're worried that actually it won't hold us to account. So this remote breathalyzer, without going into the ins and outs of it, is you get a remote breathalyzing device, you get an app on your phone, you click the app or the app, you can set alarms for it and all sorts of things. So if you know that you usually drink Friday, Saturday, Sunday nights and that's your issue point, you can put alarms on it for them. That goes off saying you need to do a test, you press accept and you'd give it your test. And they really enjoyed the fact that it held them to account. And that's helped reduce offending. I haven't got the exact figures off the top of my head, but we've had something like 3,000 monitored days or something silly like that, and we've had very little reoffending on anybody who's been on it, and as you say, quite a lot of people are actually asking us to use that now. We've been a regional lead in it, in that we've pushed it out to other forces, and other forces accepted it. So Links have got a couple out at the moment, Leicestershire have got one out as well. So yeah, really innovative.
It's a preventative tool, isn't it? Preventing that
Absolutely.
reoffending, so
Yeah.
it doesn't happen in the first place, and investing time in that work.
Changing behaviour.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay then, so creating space, safer spaces then. So, and again, you know, we touch on this from a policing point of view. This really is preventative policing at its best, isn't it? That safer space for me is more than just a geographical space. So we could say an area of any part of our communities is a hotspot area for violence against women and girls, but we need to go beyond that. So home address, place of work. I've noticed one of the questions from the public is around her working in the nighttime economy in the city centre. That to me is an extended place of work for her, for that particular member of the public. So we need to look after all those spaces. We're doing a load of work around this, and I'll give you some bullet points. So the first part, certainly more in Nottingham, but it also bleeds into into the county area as well. It is the SVAN group, the Sexual Violence Action Network. We're doing some fantastic work with them, some real good work around the Consent Coalition. Raising awareness around consent is probably one of the biggest areas, so we're doing a lot of work around that. We're doing a lot of work around the nighttime economy, as you can imagine, safer areas such as safer gyms. Going to the gym should be an enjoyable experience if you're into that type of thing. You shouldn't be going to the gym, be worried about getting laid at, or someone hanging around you or making you feel uncomfortable. That's just not right. So we're doing work around safer gyms, safer areas around that. All sorts of work with partner agencies around actually, it's probably outside the policing realm, but we can give you a bit of advice here, and we can work with you and help you develop them systems and that reporting mechanisms as well. I've already spoke about walk and talk and the Gwen. Obviously that helps us directly say that area is a concern, and then we can feed back into the MPIs, into our DOCOs, our design out crime officers, and say, right, how do we tackle that? Or how do we work with the partners to tackle that area? Again, some of the work we did in Ashfield was around improving lighting in some of the areas. Not policing like that, but that further preventative work together has had a positive results.
And there was gating orders, there was cutting back trees, no environmental improvements. They had action days where they just got tidied everywhere up, and it made women feel safe, didn't it?
Yeah.
Well, it made everybody feel safe. Yeah.
It's that you go back to the broken windows theory, isn't it?
Yeah.
If you go back to the broken windows theory back in, was it New York, back in the 80s, the place looks tatty and no one cares about it, then people are going to react in that way, aren't they? Again, it comes back to standards of culture that the chief's saying. If you set them standards high, be it in society, in communities, in organisations, then naturally that's going to reflect, isn't it, in the future? And that's exactly what we've been doing. So some of this, yes, is policey, as in, let's target them hotspot areas and let's get that data together and go out and target them areas. Let's do them high visibility patrols. Let's work with our community groups to identify those areas, but also let's work with the partners, pull people in.
I think it's just important to add to Mark, you mentioned the DOCOs. So the DOCOs will look through the VOG lens in their recommendations and reports. So in terms of future planning and alterations to spaces, that is the VOG considerations are given to all future planning through our DOC officers and crime prevention officers as well.
Yeah, so that's designing out crime officers.
Sorry.
Yeah. Okay.
And it's important, isn't it? Because unintended consequences of where you put a taxi rank.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And pedestrianisation, where women have then got to walk further through the nighttime economy to get to a safe space, is really important, isn't it?
And it's them things what sometimes you could miss, isn't it? Yeah. If you're not thinking of it through that lens. Well, actually, it's easy to print it at the bottom end of that street because there's tons of places and there's little beds you can go into. Great, lovely, but that means that now people have to walk an extra 50 metres down that unlit street. So yeah, absolutely.
It's showing the complexity.
It does, absolutely. It overarches. A couple of other bits we're doing. So it's not all around that physical part. Probably the biggest part for me, I think, is changing that behaviour cycle. Certainly with men. A brilliant exercise, and I unashamedly stole this from a project I was at. We was doing a desktop exercise, and someone said, right, everyone just write down or consider what you need to do to feel safe on a night out. And I'm sat there, I'm like, nothing really. genuinely nothing. I'm best part of 6 foot, I'm an ex-rugby player, I'm an ex-boxer. All I need to do to make sure I'm safe on night out is make sure I've got a credit card to buy around. And that was genuinely my concerns. And then they started going around the room, and then you start looking at women, and the women were saying, actually I do this and this and this and this and this, and I do this, this and this. And I was shocked by that. I thought, how can that be right? And I went home and spoke to my partner. I said, what do you do on a night out then to make sure you're safe? She went, well, if I'm not with you, I'm not going to wear a skirt, because if I'm with you, blokes aren't going to come and harass me. But if I'm wearing a skirt and I'm on my own, how can that be right then?
It's not right.
You shouldn't have to go through that. I'm not going to get a taxi home because I don't want to walk through the town. And, all those little bits. We do a lot of talks in colleges and communities. Myself and Barb's one of our team. We gave talks to a range of colleges around misogyny and Vogue. Really well received. They went away with QR codes, some very hard hitting videos in there, really making people think. Two of the best bits what we got from that is they went away and they all made a pledge to try and change behaviours.
Yeah.
And some of the feedback from the males who've been there was, actually, I didn't realise my mates acting like that was that bad, but now I understand it.
Have you noticed the difference between the young in service new recruits through the uplift programme being trained and the lengthier in service, should I say, officers, in terms of that behaviour and what's expected?
I think to a degree, I think because of the work the Chief's done and the work we've always had within policing, so everyone in policing should know what the standards are. We should. There's no excuse for not knowing that. And I think if you're coming into policing, you should be coming in with those good core values. And we test that right at day one of the training sessions, the search sessions and the like can come through. So even if you go back 30 years ago, I would expect that those people would be coming in with them values back then. And even now. I think the problem that the changes we've probably had in society now are things like communicational changes. So whereas 30 years ago it might have been 5 or 6 male cops going to the working man's club and talking, now that might be 5 or 6 people talking on a WhatsApp group, which is completely different. And there's obviously the societal shift within that as well. Quite rightly, we're going in I think the right direction alongside that. But again, our talks to the colleges should be influencing that, because those college students where I'm talking to, and there's a few hundred of them we've delivered this session to now, hopefully some of them are going to want to be police officers. They hopefully will be then coming in with that right mindset, and those people who might not want to be police officers might be imparting that mindset onto friends, family members, other members of their peer group who then come into policing with that right mindset. And that's got to be where I know it's quite a grand view to have, but we need to take them steps, don't we? Because someone has to take them steps, and I know a lot of work's been done around that. Another big area we're using as well is social media. We're putting lots of work out into social media. In next week we're having a week of action around Vogue and the nighttime economy, and again with that there's going to be lots of social media around standards of behaviour, what we expect from good people as the public, and again all that hopefully will just keep layering that systematic approach to the public of, this is what we expect, and actually as police officers that's what we expect. And hopefully we can start pushing that societal change. Obviously it's not for us on our own, that's where the PCC's office comes in, your partnership work, the commission work with the VRU, all those little bits, but working together I think we can start, I think we are starting to change society's views on Vogue, hopefully.
Yep.
Any questions around creating safer spaces?
Not on safe spaces, I have got some questions though.
Okay.
I'll let you get to do your last bit.
Do you want to do the last slide?
Do your last bit and then get ready.
That sounds rather ominous. You did steal my thunder earlier when you said Vogue is more than just policing. So I put up a quote from Kofi Annan, who obviously very international, well-renowned world leader. Violence against women is perhaps the most shameful human rights violation. I'm not going to go into read the rest of it, anyone else can read it for their own part, but that for me, that opening line sums it up. It's a shameful human rights violation. And when we start looking at those figures are too high in our society, and that is what we need to start challenging. So absolutely, thanks for stealing my thunder. But in all seriousness, it is recognised on an international level that violence against women and girls is not acceptable, should be acceptable. We're dealing with that in Nottinghamshire Police. I'm quite happy we're doing a lot of work around it, and we'll continue to do so. I know the Chiefs set her pledge out and absolutely clear around that of where we're going and the direction we should be in. And I'd like to think we're in a good place, and we're going to get stronger and get better.
Yeah, and so much of violence against women and girls is hidden as well.
Absolutely. Yeah,
absolutely. You know, whether it's domestic and sexual abuse, rape, but also so-called honour-based crimes, female genital mutilation. There's just so much there that it's tip of the iceberg what gets reported.
Absolutely. So again, you mentioned female genital mutilation, so-called honour-based abuse, forced marriage.
Yeah.
The SDIU, Safeguarding Disruption Intervention Unit, we've pulled those resources away from PP and Public Protection Unit into our team.
And exploitation as well.
And the exploitation side. So we've certainly that honour-based genre, shall we say, we've sat there, we've put that into our hub to give more safeguarding support to them.
Yeah.
Because it goes beyond that. Let's just go out and try and solve the issue. Actually, we need to try and safeguard and prevent that future part. So when you're looking at honour-based abuse, forced marriage, FGM, things like that, what's going to happen when we walk away from that door? And we need to make sure we get that safeguarding right.
Safeguarding is really important. I think we've covered the first question.
I think so.
Yeah. I just want, as you know, I work with the Association of Police and Crime Commissioners as Joint Victims Lead, and I was asked to give a response to part 1 on the Angelini inquiry.
Yes.
And there was loads of recommendations, and I really scrutinised them. I'd be interested what your thoughts were, and I've got a couple of comments.
Yeah, of course. For me, when you read the report, very interesting read.
Yeah.
Very, very, very interesting read. It's interesting that it's one part of a bigger review, and quite rightly so. For me, recommendations 1 to 6, which is all around the indecent exposure and how we manage that within a policing context. From a force point of view, we're waiting for the College of Policing and the Home Office review, because obviously that's still ongoing. September, December time, I think their final findings are coming out around that. And I'm sure our approach will reflect that if there's any changes. What I can say from our point of view, and I'm speaking as an investigator here, is if we have a report of indecent exposure, it is taken very seriously. It'll be graded against threat, risk and harm. If there is an intimation that the offender is still there, still present, then it'd be coming in as what we call a grade 1. So that's an immediate response, get there and deal with it, and obviously we'll be going there and dealing with it. If it's I've come home and somebody's flashed me, for want of a better word, then it may go in as a grade 2. But again, if we think actually it's in that time frame, we could probably still look at it as a grade 1. And then obviously our investigation around that would depend on what the circumstances are. Certainly when I was in public protection, we'd quite often pick them up into the Mossabo arena, so management of serious and violent sexual offenders, because we'd be looking at saying, are any of our offenders live in that area who've got a previous history for flashing, for example, or whatever the indecent exposure is, to cross-reference them areas. And even where it doesn't fit in there, say local policing picked it up, we'd have them quick tie-ins in. I mentioned the DDM earlier, the Daily Demand Management Meeting. I'm sure a few might slip through the net, but generally speaking, indecent exposure would be on that force report, which is obviously seen by the Chief, seen by our senior leaders in the morning, and would be given impetus and focus. So, whilst I can't say what that guidance is going to look like, because obviously we're not part of that panel, I would say we've got a good, robust system at the moment of meeting that, and no doubt whatever that review comes up with, we'll be somewhere close to it. Do we adopt a force policy purely around our response to that? I'd say probably not. But again, that'd be a decision for the Chief and from the COT team. But I think if you have a policy for every single crime, you'll lose some of that impetus, and you start getting in that, well, what is it and what is it? Actually, let's just go and deal with it. Recognise it for what it is. It's a serious crime, possibly a prelude to a sexual offence. Let's get there and deal with it. And at the moment, I think we're in the right place for that.
Yeah.
Recommendation 7 to 13 was all around vetting.
Yeah.
So as I touched on earlier, we had that review. It came out was good, and since then our PSD and vetting team have even more strengthened that area. It's not an area that I'm overly afraid, so Chief, I may have come across to yourself for a little bit, but my understanding of the area, and again speaking as someone who's vetted regularly, we're annually vetted now, so we've got a process in place for that. I had mine last week come through, and I filled in and sent it back straight away. Very time bound around them, so we've got to respond 14 days, I think it said on it. So, and if I didn't, then I'm sure Heather would be getting a message going, why not, and we'd be able to account. There's a lot of scrutiny around that. When we had the first tranche of reviews, the PSD went through every single one, and then anywhere there was any even minor highlights, I'd suggest, and again the Chief might be able to give more clarity around this area, that then got independently scrutinised by the PSD, and we looked at that and dug more into it. So I think.
So we had the historic data watch, and you've been briefed, haven't you?
Yeah.
And sort of our findings from that, and we obviously did every member of the organisation, and from that there was a few that we had to relook at, but there was no significant concerns. And so you've had that briefing from professional standards.
Yeah, I did notice what it said. One of the recommendations was, with immediate effect, the College of Policing, in collaboration with force recruitment, would ensure every new candidate applying to become a police officer in every police force undergoes an in-person interview. That makes sense.
That,
and a home visit. And I wasn't sure about.
I don't believe we do that at the moment. I think that's a recommendation which not fully come out as yet. From my understanding of reading that document, I think it's still under discussion. I think it's September time-ish that's due for publication, and I'm sure as and when that does come out, there'll be conversations with the Chief Constable and the PSD of what would that look like. But certainly everybody has an in-person interview. I've certainly done a few of them interviews myself, and we are very thorough.
Because I know not all forces have always done in-person interviews, have they? So.
No, and I think even during COVID, we still did it, although not in person as in sat in front of us, but we still did that meeting through Teams where everybody was face to face. Sorry, sounds stupid, but everyone had that direct interview process where you're right, some forces just did away with the interview.
I'd just be interested to be kept updated on your thoughts around the home visits and what resource implications that could mean, and also if you think it is the right thing to do.
Yeah, I'll have that. That's a separate discussion from
that's
last
okay.
month. I'll take that one.
Yeah, thank you.
Recommendation 14-15 is around culture within the force. I think we've touched on that. I can certainly say from my point of view, as a police officer in Nottinghamshire Police, I know exactly what the Chief expects. My team know exactly what I expect from them, and that goes right the way through. And I'm going to speak for Heather because I know Heather's spoke to myself and Stephen around it. Everyone under Heather's command knows exactly what's expected from the Chief, and I think it would be fair to say that's reflected across the force now. And then the last part, recommendation 16, is around women in policing. I think we're doing very well around women in policing. We've got women in senior roles within our organisation. I should know this because about a year and a half ago, I mentioned this on my promotion board, and I cannot for the life of me remember it, but I think it's around about 49% male to female ratio within Nottinghamshire Police. I may be wrong on that, so please don't quote me on that. But we are there and thereabouts, and it's reflective of society. I think society is 51% female, 49% male. We're not far off that. As a force, we do lots of great work around making sure that the workplace is suitable for the women. So your kit and uniform, we do lots of work around that to make sure it's right. There's various groups like the news group. We have the menopause awareness group. We have a whole host of female-led groups to make sure that those individual needs of various females are met, both across the force and individually for any other part of it.
And Mark, you sit on the news group, don't you?
I sit on the news group, yeah. So
What
I
does it stand for?
Nottingham Empowering Women to Succeed.
Oh, good.
So
I like
I go to that meeting, and I go there as a Vogue lead, and I sit there as a bit of a critical friend, but also actually to be receptive of what are those issues and what may be faced in force.
Male ally.
Yeah, male ally, yeah, absolutely. So yeah, for me, recommendation 16, I think we are there, we're doing that. No doubt we will still continue to look to develop that further. I know there's a working group about uniform and uniform fitting and all bits and pieces, and again that national review comes out, I think it's December, that's set to come out, and again no doubt our working groups will look at that and procure that kit as and when we need to.
Thank you. Just skipping back to something you spoke about earlier when you were talking about IOM and the DV perpetrator, you mentioned about 40.
Yep.
They're on the IOM side of things.
Yep.
Do you do any work to target the top 100 perpetrators before they get there?
Yes. in very simplistic terms. I know it's one of the questions further down. Yeah, basically the SDIU has been set up for that very purpose. So the Safeguarding Disruption Intervention Team, it was, I'm going to say a brainchild of mine from probably about about 18 months, 2 years ago, around actually how do we target those repeat victims of domestic abuse. So I sat on our domestic homicide review panels.
They're hard, aren't they?
They're horrible places to go into. Because when you start listening to the background and hearing the victim's voice in them, quite often you will see that there's
the pattern,
failings and patterns. So within that, I looked at that and saying, how do we safeguard them? And one of the big things you find in domestic homicide reviews, or certainly my findings, and it's been reflected in the work of Jane Monckton-Smith, is that a large body of those victims of domestic homicide reviews are standard risk initially. So they've come in as standard risk, so they haven't got the wraparound of a high risk, they haven't got the wraparound of a medium risk, and because they're standard risk, they not fall between the cracks, but they probably don't get the same level of support, which then could lead to some of that hidden incidents or hidden harm or hidden abuse creeping through. So I looked at that and said, right, how do we stop that from happening? Because that's where we need to be, and we need to stop that. So I looked at the work of Monckton-Smith, Jane Monckton-Smith, ex-DCI from another force, now a doctor, and she's produced a fantastic piece of work, which is them, and forgive me if I don't get this quite right, but it's the Monckton-Smith 8-stage timeline to domestic homicide. So as you can see, it just rolls off the tongue. But basically, it's a brilliant piece of work where it is a timeline of 8 distinct stages of domestic abuse, which are more likely to end in a domestic homicide or suicide. And actually, if we can identify where a potential repeat victim is on that, if you're getting onto them higher steps, can we intervene and can we do some work to stop? And that was the driving force behind creating the SDIU. Within that, though, we've got to be cognizant of level of service and what that looks like. So we've built in at the moment it's a very numeric driven element to one part of it. So how many times has the person been a repeat victim of standard risk? And we put that alongside what we call the DVIOM washouts. So if you don't meet the right scoring to go into DVIOM, can we consider you for the SDIU? So we're not just saying, no, you're getting nothing. Do you fit that model and do you fit that service? Those that do, we measure against the Monckton-Smith model and we say, where are you? Because we've got to look at threat, risk and harm. And where within there do you fit? And the higher you score on that Monckton-Smith model, although it's not a scoring model as such, if you're close to that 8, 6, 7, 8, we need to come in and do some work with. And the idea is to either safeguard the victim, ideally, so that could be right to ask, right to know. So one of the first step is, quite often offenders will have a history of domestic abuse. Well, right to ask and right to know say that we can tell people that your partner...
Is that different to Clare's law?
It is Clare's law. It's just the simplest... It's the way I remember it and how we refer to it for. So yeah, DVDS, Domestic Violence Disclosure Scheme, also known as Clare law. We break into 2 parts. Right to ask, so any member of the public can ask. And right to know is where we look and go, I think I need to tell you about this. Because we think there's a risk where you might not be aware of this. And if you were aware of it, you might change what you're thinking around your relationship. So we'll consider those elements. We then put the safeguarding visits in. So we'll go down, so our team will go down, visit, have a conversation, try and establish why they're repeat victims and if there's anything we can do. So it could be very simple things such as, I can't leave because I've got nowhere to go. Right, well, can we work with housing for you? Can we do something else? I can't leave because I'm an alcoholic. Can we help you with your substance abuse? Can we signpost you to the right areas to go that? I'm just scared of leaving. Right, well, can we look at civil orders? What can we do today? So we do that, and obviously that takes a lot of work, a lot of resource. So we can't have, let's do it for everybody. So we have to pick the highest of the standard risks, if that makes sense. So we've currently got 3 safeguarding officers. Each of those will have a cohort of 5. So at the moment we've got 12 on the cohort. So each have got 4 at the moment. And they'll get repeat visits every week. We have a contact with them. We look to monitor and work through them actions of how we can support them. Some people don't want our help, some people say no thanks, but we'll still give them some safeguarding support and understanding. Alongside that, we've got another safeguarding officer who's done some fantastic work for us in the past. He's heavily linked into various organisations, and he will also go and do a physical site check, for want of a better word, and we'll look at some physical security measures as well. So use of safe water, smart water, sorry, from Deterex. So if we think our offender keeps coming back to the premises and keeps climbing over the back fence to have a look through the window, we could put this stuff on some of the smart water tech on the back fence. So when we then go and do our visit, we can scan his hands, and if it comes up on his hands, well, actually you've clearly been on the back fence. We've also got other bits of kit which I'm not going to discuss because that'd give away some of the tactics we use. But it's an holistic safeguarding view. As not only can we look after you and safeguard you, can we actually make some physical changes to help you, as in sanctuary scheme, safeguarding the house, ring doorbells, all that type of stuff, and we've got access to things like that. Into what can we do around the offender? So we will look at the civil orders, we will look at, is there intelligence to say that this person's wanted for another offence? Right, well, let's prompt that team to go and arrest that person early, because that might be another safeguarding method. Yeah, the victim might not want to progress for the assault, for example, but we've got him for a shop theft. Let's lock him up for a shop theft then and do some work around that. So yeah, we can hold up to 15 on that. We started off initially reviewing monthly, but then we found actually, because of the quality of the service someone we're getting, actually within 2 weeks they've changed the manner and did the relationship and moved on. Good. So we've changed it now to a 2-week turnaround process. So we're actually getting through quite quick. Unfortunately I haven't got the figures with me of how many we've been through. But I can get them to you and I can feed them back outside this. But yeah, so in answer to your question, those lower end repeat victims, yes, we have got a process in place, and that's the SDIU.
Okay. Just looking at the Opsateria.
Yes.
If you could explain for the public what Opsateria is and how it's been brought into Nottinghamshire Police and the impact it's having.
Yeah. So Opsateria, and again goes back to that national big piece of work we did around violence against women and girls in its infancy. So one of the core pieces of work we did was actually what does the crime profiling look like. So domestic abuse is high, and also what we call RASO, rape and serious sexual offences, it is exceptionally high. And that's a very complicated area to investigate, as you can imagine, through be it historic crimes or crimes which are happening now, or the type of offending or pattern of offending. So Opsateria was the standardisation, professionalisation of those specific RASO type offences, so those serious sexual violence offences. So College Police went away and said, what does really good look like? What does the standards we need to deliver for this? And that's where Opsateria was born from, and they've then basically worked through actually what does a good investigation look like, and it takes into account things like trauma-informed approach to your victim. So why is your victim waited 2 years to disclose this? Well, actually, because there's a lot of trauma in the back of it. How do we understand the offending profile? How do we get best evidence? How do we use what we call res gesta evidence, so that initial account? Are we using that enough? Are we using evidence-led prosecutions? And Opsateria is basically the consolidation of that work and then put into that training area. And it covers all sorts of parts around professionalising our investigators. So we've got what we call the SkyDip programme, which is specifically around serious sexual crimes. Understanding what that looks like, what does the CPD around that look like, because again you need to keep current on your current parts. Also, how do we use digital media? There's a whole myriad of things, but ultimately it's the improvement of our response to serious sexual offending. Going back to your question of what we're doing in force, public protection team are delivering that. It's obviously by superintendent, being led by a chief inspector. We've already delivered the training packages what have come in force, and we're already working towards actually fully embedding that work. And I believe, and again I'm not part of that team so I wouldn't be able to comment, but I'm pretty certain we'll have an action plan around that, and we'll be having regular governance updates of where we are with Opsateria and certainly from the feedback from meetings I've been in, we're well on our way around that.
Yeah, so that gets updated by the PP Super and the Vulnerability Board.
Yeah, thank you. And now I've got a question from the public.
Okay.
So Olivia from the Arboretum in Nottingham, what are you doing around the safety of promo staff in nightclubs? And a bit of background, Olivia believes that promo staff in nightclubs navigate the nighttime economy as part of their job and they're really vulnerable.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we touched on it during the slideshow. So when we look at the nighttime economy, we always think people working in bars or people travelling between. Well, promotion staff are actually wandering around the towns, handing out your flyers and all that type of stuff. And probably some of the most vulnerable people, aren't they? Because they're away from their place of work and they're probably working in isolation. Whereas, a group of people out having a few drinks with friends, and if you're in the bar, you're in the bar. What are we doing from a policing point of view? So in the town centres, certainly in Nottingham City Centre, we've got nighttime economy patrols out. So again, I'm not going to go into numbers around that because that would be then going into very operational details. Needless to say, going to Nottingham City Centre on a Friday and Saturday night, you will see plenty of yellow vests knocking around and officers out there being available. But we also work, more importantly, really closely with other agencies out there, so street pastors, CPOs, CCTV, all those other elements of the nighttime economy, the door staff and all those different areas to try and keep that area safe. The big thing I would say to Olivia is, if you're feeling unsafe or unsecure in there, come and speak to somebody, be it the door staff, be it a CPO, be it a police officer, because they have that link to each other. We have different methods of communication. We can go through CCTV and whatever. We can collectively work to keep you safe, but also tell us where them issues are in them areas, then we could start targeting them. Because we don't want to be putting our resources into the area where we think there's an issue, if actually there's not an issue there, the issue's somewhere else. But again, we need to know that from members of the public in order to do that.
Thank you. So just to reiterate, report it.
Report it, absolutely, 100%.
I'm always saying it.
Yeah.
And you've already spoken about this, Mark, but Michael from Newark specifically asked, do men not have crime committed against them? Why are females so special?
Yeah, and again, I'd refer back to the answer I gave earlier. When you start looking at them figures and you start breaking them figures down into the actual nuts and bolts, 16,773 victims of domestic abuse, and 95+% of them are females.
Yeah.
Yes, we've got male victims, but they are significantly less than that, and likewise when you start going to sexual offending. So that's why the focus is towards violence against women and girls. That said, if a male rings up and says, I've been a victim of domestic abuse, or I've been a victim of sexual abuse, or homophobic crime, or hate crime, or absolutely anything else, we will still take that report very seriously. You'll still get the same level of service. It's just not receiving that same strategic overview that this issue has, because this is clearly a perennial issue for society.
Thank you. You mentioned earlier about the numbers. 2 women a week are killed.
Yeah.
I don't know what the number is, but I remember it. I was shocked to hear it was a higher number that commit suicide because they're in domestic abuse relationships.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Per week, then actually are killed.
Yeah.
So this is a massive issue, and I really hope that people who are listening today understand how seriously we're taking this here.
And again, it's a really fair point you raised there about the suicide element. So suicide do feature into the domestic homicide reviews.
Yeah, they do, yeah.
They are one of the core components around that. And again, within our team, we've brought on board to our team suicide prevention, because we know that overlap. We've seen that overlap. So we have a member of staff now who monitors. I'm trying to say this without it sounding crass. Monitors those suicidal rates coming through. And then we're reviewing them, which is something we'd never done, be it partnership or independently, and saying, actually, could domestic abuse play a part in this? And then we're feeding that back into the partners to consider domestic homicide reviews in the forward.
I read a shocking DHL, it was coercive control.
Yeah.
Was the to put somebody over the edge.
Preventive actions for preventing suicide, but it's probably a whole other hour-long conversation.
I was going to say,
thank you.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. Any more questions from the team? That's really helpful. But please, we want to reach into this space. It's really important to have that reassurance to the public of what you're doing, and that it's really, I'm going to go back again and say, if people report, they'll be believed, listened to, believed and supported.
Absolutely.
That's the main thing I want to end on.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I'm going to close this back to the meeting. Now this is the public bit, and then we're going to go on to some confidential stuff. Thank you.